Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Shadowverse. Today is Wednesday, August 26th, which means I have 4 days until September, which means I need to schedule more videos. I'm oddly in the position where I'm making progress recording footage, and I'm glad for that, but I'm kind of dropping the ball still. Like, I'm saying this almost every week at this point, that I'm dropping the ball as far as actually getting things done. And I don't even know if I played for daily wins yesterday, which was probably a mistake. But my Bloodcraft deck, which I rebuilt, is working fairly nicely, so we can show that off. And that got me up another rank. And in fact, I think I'm not very far from potentially being at the next rank of unlimited play. I ended last recording saying I was going to spend over 10,000 vials to craft all the bronze cards that ever existed, just so I have like one of everything. And to a certain extent that worked, but it only worked pretty much for a brief moment. You can see here, well, where did that one come from? This, man, either they're adding new cards or Tempest of the Gods. What even set is that? Oh, it's right here. Alright, well, I missed one. What I had done is I went in this mode and I went like this, and this. So I guess maybe I just overshot one. But I think if these work the way they should, you can see that there's very little gray in this collection for the first about 35 pages, and there should be absolutely no gray. Now, was this a smart move? It kind of depends. It's a matter of whether or not you're committing to ever open a large amount of packs from the unlimited cards, or whether you just want to own one of each card and be done with it. Because if you're just spending 50 vials to own the art, so that you can do this and then click on this and just see a pretty picture, you're not spending too much for bronzes that way, because it's, I believe, 200 vials for the next tier up to craft anything. Plus, in theory, if you're going forward and you're going to spend all your gold buying the new expansion, which right now is Fortune's Hand, you're going to end up getting so many duplicates anyways that you will almost certainly end up with a ton of vials to get bronzes anyways. But what you're not doing here is you're not setting yourself up for success if you want to craft a legendary card, which in Shadowverse, unlike Hearthstone and Magic the Gathering, you can use the temporary gems, which you should be getting through daily victories, 3 daily victories anyways, and then you should use the temporary gems to get the legendary cards at that point. And at some point you probably will just meet in the middle and have a complete collection, although you may never reach that point if you don't spend money. So I got to page 31 of 55 before I ran out of gems, which is half, certainly. So there's still a ton of things here to collect, and certainly a ton of animated versions, and maybe I've opened the door that I would get higher chances of getting animated versions of the cards, or maybe I've opened the door to potentially not getting the same cards over and over again. I imagine actually there's no truth to any of that, and it is just honest odds of randomness, a weighted randomness in each card pack opening. But certainly, I had thought with 10,000 that I would have been able to get everything. So I misjudged the amount there, so for sure. And if we were to just include the other cards, you have here a card that costs 800 vials to craft. Here you have a legendary that costs 3,500 vials. And see, this is where the balance really would come into it, is you have these temporary cards that are actually permanent, you just can't be liquefied, versus getting these in reality. And the only thing I could think is that maybe at some point the temporary cards, if you have 3 copies, if you get 3 copies in reality, you would then get back your gems to get more temporary cards. That would be the only thing I could really hope for. But you can see that for all the other cards, there are 93 pages, and there's a lot of stuff that would need to be crafted. And once again, silver cards, if we just limit it to silver cards, that's 39 pages, and that's 200 vials. So for your vials, the cheapest bet is to get one of everything in the bronze first and foremost. But you also may have just wasted all good opportunities I will ever have to get vials. So I may never get back up to 10,000 vials unless I just go on a buying spree, which I don't think there's a high chance of that. Like, I probably should wait until I hit 1,000 to buy 10 more packs, and then we just sit on basically 100 packs worth of gold ready to go for the next expansion, even though the next expansion is probably 2 to 3 months away. And then I would have to double check the draw rates to see if you have a better chance of getting the legendaries here versus getting the legendaries here. But I don't think there is much of a difference there. Let's just open one pack for fun. Like, you definitely have much more of a consistent experience in this compared to Magic the Gathering or Hearthstone, as far as them really trying hard to make sure you spend a decent amount of time every couple days opening a pack. Mind Splitter looks like it might be new. So let's get back to this. We need to also do an arena. So we'll jump into the arena. So for the accountability sections, yeah, 7 of those cards that I just opened were redundant, and they just turned into vials again. And it seems fairly obvious that on the latest expansion I am getting a decent collection of silver redundancies, which then get turned back into vials. Notice that I'm also at 20 vials. They've got it designed some way that you're always going to be a little bit off. Alright, so let's do our free entry. I may have missed a free entry. Let's do this Bloodcraft and show off Bloodcraft. We did the pick 6 on Monday, and we played Bloodcraft cards in the hope to get more Bloodcraft cards. But also I built this deck based on the new cards that I crafted. Which deck building certainly has gotten significantly more difficult now, because there are just a ton more cards to potentially look at and think about. But it's not really as much of a problem as you would think, because the key phrases and the concepts still are really down to As far as I can see, as a newbie player, there seems to be 3, maybe 4 concepts that you can do for Bloodcraft and each of the heroes. Like, you can try and play bats and overwhelm the character. You could try and play drain characters. I don't think I have enough drain characters for that to really work or make sense. You can try to activate vengeance by hurting yourself. There's also some spells that will hurt your opponent. But there's nothing super crazy. There's not a specific card yet that I've found like Bolas Citadel and Magic the Gathering where you can build an entire deck and find easily 30 or 40 different types of cards that might synergize with something like Bolas Citadel. Storm, Fall Flare, 3 damage, or just do that.
I can devour your dreams.
As for the accountability section, I finished Cuphead. At that point, I wanted to show off the Wonder Boy / Monster World series, which is a Japanese series that was on the Mega Drive originally, or at least Wonder Boy 2 and 3 or 3 and 4 were on the Mega Drive, and there are much more modern versions of that game in that series as it came back. In particular, Monster Boy, which is a combination of Wonder Boy and Monster World. That game looked very much like the Shantae game that I played, Risky's Revenge Director's Cut, where Shantae in that game turned into creatures, Monster Boy turns into creatures. So that was my general thought. But the only Wonder Boy games I have are on the Sega Classics Mega Drive collection, which is a very, very small collection of mostly only Sega games, or what I assume are games that Sega owns the companies of. So you've got like the Mega Drive versions, not the 32X versions of like Sonic games, where I think there probably were 32X versions of the Sonic games that are better, or remakes. So even the Sonic games in that collection didn't really play the way I would have liked them to. And you have a few other games, but the vast majority of them were completely irrelevant. Altered Beast is not as good as the arcade version on the Mega Drive. There are some Phantasy Star games, Phantasy Star 2 and 3, which I guess if you were a fan of Phantasy Star Online, you might go back and play that. There's Streets of Rage games, again, probably not as good as the arcade versions. Vector Man, I remember playing Vector Man, but I don't really recommend playing it. I don't recommend playing the Wonder Boy games either. They're all just very, very old Mega Drive games, and generally speaking, as a Nintendo fanboy, or at least as a former Nintendo fanboy, most of the Sega Genesis games just didn't have as good a quality as the NES games. Also, though, none of the games on Steam in the Mega Drive Classics are the licensed games, so you're not getting any of the Disney games or Batman games or anything like that. You don't have any Mega Man games for the Mega Drive. You don't have any Castlevania games. The offering is just really, really poor. And at a point, they were selling those games individually for about 99 cents, and honestly, they weren't even worth that much. But then they at one point just bundled the whole thing together, so you're paying, I think, probably close to $20 for the whole thing. I think I got all of those games through a Humble Bundle cheaper than that, but also I think I have some key codes that would give me like Sonic for free, but none of the other games, and I can't use the codes because I already have all the games. And as I did 3 over-hour spotlights just looking at each of the individual Mega Drive games that were available, I was constantly thinking to myself and saying out loud that even though the Mega Drive Classics does have this like child's room metaphor for an interface and for a menu, which you can skip and just launch a simple menu if you don't like, it's missing a lot of the options that you would have just using RetroArch. And I was saying to myself, yeah, just install RetroArch. RetroArch is on Steam. And then I went and looked, and actually RetroArch is not yet on Steam. It's coming to Steam, so maybe when the video comes out, I'll be actually correct on that point. But yeah, I made a mistake there. Let's see. And do this. And then do this. And then we'll go ahead and evolve this. You will soon learn. And hit that. And hit that. I need to find a card to destroy this artifact or play word or destroy a different creature or artifact, because there is a in-game strategy here that he's playing to, and you're gonna see him pull it out, I think, fairly quickly. Like, typically Portalcraft players aren't just playing these artifacts just to toggle themselves into resonance and out of resonance for no reason. Or just to have a lot of cheap creatures on the field. So yeah, just the inability to have like individual controller settings and just perhaps visual settings for each of the individual games is a pain. It clearly seems to me like they probably are using the open source emulator engines in their own version, but they're not admitting to that, because it has a rewind and fast forward ability, it has a quick save, quick load ability, which honestly for a lot of old games of what they call the 3rd generation consoles is what Wikipedia calls them, although I would say NES and Mega Drive are really the 2nd generation of consoles. But regardless, most of those games for NES and Mega Drive are not in a certain point. They're not capable of being beaten unless you can cheat the game very much. And quick save, quick load, make checkpoints, and honestly a lot of the control settings are just weird for the Mega Drive in particular. I would say the only way you're gonna have a really great experience with the Mega Drive games is if you get like an 8-bit style Bluetooth controller that feels very much like the Mega Drive, because the Mega Drive controller had 3 buttons in a row, and in one game, like, the button on the left on the Xbox One controller was actually the button on the right, and in one game you were activating abilities using like the right bump and the left bump and the Y button, and that doesn't make a lot of sense either. Almost all the games did not run smoothly. They probably ran fairly accurately to the way they ran originally, and it really is just a good argument for if the Mega Drive games that were available that I was playing had relevancy. They should be remastered and re-released, and just not remastered, remade completely. They're so old, you can't just remaster and re-release them.
My barrier is impenetrable.
Even like Sonic 1 even is not as good as it should be, because you don't have the ability in Sonic 1 to press down and spin yourself upwards, and Sonic 2 does improve that somewhat, but then Sonic and Knuckles, Sonic 3, kind of changes the level design. On several of the games it felt like one team was in charge of making like the first game. Gauntlet 1 is like this, and then Gauntlet 1 isn't that good, and it seems like a second team was put in charge of making Gauntlet 2, and I felt like Gauntlet 2 was fairly good, but then it felt like you were back to the first team again for Gauntlet 3, because a lot of the changes and the additions in Gauntlet 2 did not carry over to Gauntlet 3, and I didn't like Gauntlet 3 that much. So yeah, I feel like the Mega Drive games were released probably at a breakneck pace. For a long time there, I was mistaking it and calling it the Master System, and the Master System really didn't get many sales in the United States, if any, and so I looked up the number of games for the Master System, and it turned out that there was barely 300 of them compared to like the 700 NES games that were licensed and released. And then because of that mistake, I went back and I eventually realized that mistake and went back and looked at how many Mega Drive games there are, and it was closer to about 500 games. But I eventually looked through the entire list of all the Mega Drive games, compared that to the entire list of the NES games, and the quality is just drastically lower in my opinion. But I will say, like, Comic Zone, a remake of that would be great. Sonic 1, 2, and 3, Sonic Spinball, all of those being remade would be great. And you're not in really a position where anybody would complain about remakes around those games, and Sega owns the license to those, so they could certainly have them happen, but they're just not interested in doing it, particularly since there is still enough nostalgic stupid people like me who would just buy the ROMs and pay 99 cents for ROMs that you actually would never play. And yeah, at the end of the third episode of that Spotlight, which this is the longest Spotlight I've ever made with 3 episodes. Usually Spotlight's supposed to be only have 1 episode, but at the end of it, I tried to make the most cogent and best argument I could to say, you know, in all realisticness, if it was just 30 years in which you had copyright protection for Sonic, then Sonic would either be in the public domain right now or in the public domain tomorrow, like next year. Not tomorrow, but because like it has been about 30 years since Sonic has come out, if not over that point. And the person who created the character of Sonic does not get any royalties, I'm sure, for every new Sonic game that's made. The management team at Sega that they greenlit Sonic 1 probably aren't getting any bonuses based on it. The idea of getting royalties on video games has never been a thing. So you're having this situation in this case where copyright is not protecting the actual creators. It's not protecting anyone more than likely that actually worked on Sonic 1. And yet you have the corporation of Sega being able to do basically no effort at all and still make money from it at the expense of society. And this is where copyright was supposed to be a delicate balance, and it never actually was made into that, because it was supposed to be that literally just enough to keep authors from starving to death, and stopping people from just copying other authors' books and selling them on the shelves at the exact same time. It was supposed to be a very limited monopoly, or it should at least be a very limited monopoly, and it just isn't that. And so, as it currently exists, society is getting gouged to play a 30-year-old abandonware, for lack of a better description, game that they have nostalgia for. And on top of that, society is not benefiting from the idea of somebody making another Sonic game. And you can see in that 30 years time, there's been very few attempts to make a parody Sonic game, or anything even slightly styled like a Sonic game. Whereas if it was in the public domain, people would be able to use the character of Sonic. They'd be able to make their own games. And the best Sonic game we've seen was a fan game that Sega decided to let the creators publish instead of try to sue out of existence. But every time Sega themselves tries to do anything with the character of Sonic, they pretty much royally screw it up. So, yeah, how has copyright really helped society there in any way? Either as the individual creator of Sonic, or as someone who worked on Sonic 1. And maybe there is an argument there that the character of Sonic should not be copyrightable at all, in the idea that maybe Sherlock Holmes should have never been a character that was copyrightable, and instead just the entire composition of Sonic, in the sense of the entire game, the code, the level layout design, and stuff like that, of Sonic 1 would have been the only thing copyrighted. That way some fan could have made a unofficial Sonic 2 2 years after the release of Sonic 1. But in the current system of copyright, both in Japan, which is even worse than the copyright system in America, you are definitely left in this situation where you're allowing corporations, which are the only people with the time and money to actually file copyright paperwork and claims and lawsuits, to suck the mental wealth, if not the physical wealth also, out of society, and milk something that they very often didn't even create themselves. And so, yeah, I'm at the end of looking at the Sega Mega Drive collection. I can't say, well, much of anything, unless you're just really interested in saying you own those. It was like 50, maybe 60 games from Sega, and then you were going to go and download ROMs, which I wouldn't be surprised if you could just use the ROMs by default in that collection. But if you were going to do that, and then you actually did have to go download the same ROMs for the same games, you would almost certainly end up downloading way more than the 50 games that were available in that collection, you'd probably end up just getting a complete collection of all 500 of them, and then you would have to kind of curate down to the maybe 25 to 40 games you actually would want to play from the Mega Drive. And honestly, I think for NES and Mega Drive games, the most relevant games are probably the Disney kid-friendly games, more than even the teenage things.
Angels don't miss.
Okay. Vengeance is now activated. And after that point of doing 3 1-hour spotlights, looking at a bunch of Mega Drive games and not having a lot to say about any of them, like, I will say the Streets of Rage series did look slightly interesting, so a more modern game in the Streets of Rage series, I could see wanting to do that and playing that. But everything else is pretty much fairly pointless by the looks of it and the feel of it. Like, and I would be very surprised to find out if there actually isn't a Sonic 32X version remaster and my memories are just wrong. Like, a remake of Echo the Dolphin games would be interesting, certainly.
Your strength is formidable.
But yeah, and there aren't any other games even worth mentioning. Like the Shinobi games, there are several Shinobi games, and they're ridiculous games. I wouldn't play a lot of Contra games. There's Space Harrier. I probably could, if I struggled really hard, name all the games I actually looked at, but yeah, there's no point. Like, most of them aren't relevant, and most of them, when you actually go back and try and play them, are pointless, and that's what Sega knows, and that's unless they're willing to remake things and make a put in new modern concepts of a game where you have continues. There was a ton of Sega games that literally, when you died 3 times, it would just reset the console. You just didn't even have a continue, let alone like regenerating health or anything that would seem reasonable. None of the games, I think, had checkpoints. Some of them had decent graphics, some of them had decent audio, but a lot of them also just looked pretty terrible. Here we have another leader character I don't recognize. And after that, I started playing the next Shantae game, and I had a false start in the first attempt to record it, in that Shantae, not Risky's Revenge, but Shantae's and the Pirate's Curse, apparently is just ported fairly terribly. The main menu has EIT instead of EXIT to exit the game, and that was pointed out to the creators like 4 years ago, and they still haven't fixed it, which I don't think you're charged anything for like verification to put out a new version of a game on Steam, so that there's really no excuse there, other than they were just focused on making their next game, which, in all fairness, I will say the next game in the series is a lot more visually interesting, because I think the next Shantae game, the 4th game in the series, is an actual PC game, whereas the Pirate's Curse is a Nintendo 3DS game that has just been ported. But it also has a problem in which it does not, at least on my multi-monitor screen with the RTX 2080, it was not deciding to run at 60 Hz. So, and there's no option in the options to force that. So when I started a game, the controls moved hyper fast, and it skipped through the entire game intro sequence in about a second. So I suspect the game was running at somewhere between 400 and 500 frames per second. And the only thing I figured out how to fix it. I had to go into the NVIDIA control panel under the 3D settings and force it to have a max frame rate of 60 frames per second and turn on vertical sync, which I have never had to do that for any other game.
Isn't demonic armor lovely?
So I am dissatisfied slightly by that idea.
Try this on for size.
But after I fixed that problem, after I had that false start and got it running at the right frame rate, and I also had to adjust the audio somewhat. It was too loud in the menu and too quiet in the game. After that point, I was able to start playing the game, and I got an hour episode of it. It is Shantae This the Pirate Curse is like a direct continuation of the story from Risky's Revenge. So you kind of have to play Risky's Revenge, Director's Cut, and that puts you in a weird position, certainly, because then you're playing a Game Boy Advance game before you can play a Nintendo 3DS game. There's about 4 years difference between Risky's Revenge and Pirate's Curse, and you can definitely see the improved graphics and a different style of gameplay being embraced with the Pirate's Curse compared to Risky's Revenge. But they've also kind of aged up the game. Clearly, they wanted a scenario where Shantae games were more lewd, teen plus, maybe even bordering on an M-rated game. They liked in Risky's Revenge, which was rated E for everyone, to have Shantae in her standard uniform of a belly dancer genie outfit, which shows a lot of skin, and then they would make adult jokes in the text, and once you beat the game, you unlocked a new mode that put her in a different scantily clad outfit, and they drew every single female in the game very, very curvaceously.
The night will be stained in blood.
So you definitely knew that the artists were enjoying drawing the females, and I don't hate that. It's just that the game itself in Risky's Revenge played like a E for everyone 10 plus game. It was a very simplistic platformer that just kind of had an oddly age inappropriate experience. I'm getting wrecked by this card.
Your strength is formidable.
Twice now. So apparently these people, I need to know how this card works and think about it some more. And I swear I was winning with Bloodcraft before, but who knows? I could have just been playing in the middle of the night and had no real competition. I feel like in Shadowverse particularly, you do run into this situation where if you can avoid the Japanese audience, you're going to have considerably easier games. The more recent Shantae game is rated T for Teen Plus, but then also the platforming section in the kind of intro part was a lot harder. I actually failed before in what was like the tutorial intro part of the game several times because the platforming really did require me to press the jump button twice really fast. It might really be an argument that I should actually force it down to 30 frames per second and see if that actually slows the game down a little bit more, because it was platforms where missiles were being shot up at the platforms as soon as you landed on them, so you had only a brief second, but there was a fairly wide inconsistency for how long you could delay, whether it was like half a second or a tenth of a second. Some of the jumps it felt like you had maybe a tenth of a second or less to immediately jump off of it, and other points it seemed like you had a full half second, if not a full second, to jump forward. So that is a weirder experience, although I don't think I would immediately say I hate that experience or that was the wrong way to go. If it does turn out that the Pirate's Curse just as a game is a lot more difficult, and it puts me in this weird position where I might actually rage quit in the Pirate's Curse, that would be a very wide swing in the wrong direction, in the opposite direction. But yeah, well, I'll just have to play more and we'll see what happens. Let's see. Kill this. Do that. And do that. But yeah, I've only gotten one episode there and I want to play more of that. And then also I need to schedule, of course, and I never want to do that. I also managed to do a little bit of more research, and it turns out that the Ryzen 3 Threadripper AMD CPUs actually aren't even out yet. So I was thinking about buying a Ryzen 3, and actually no, I'll almost certainly buy a Ryzen 2, which means that I almost certainly won't have I won't have as much of a need to have a huge brand new newest of the new motherboards, and I was able to find a motherboard that is just like one model lower, and the only real trade-off there is that you have potentially one less M2 NVMe slot for a secondary SSD, but you're saving $50 on the motherboard for what a $15 riser card could do, assuming you're not fully populating all of the PCI Express slots. Now, at some point in the future, I might actually fully populate all the PCI Express slots, because I have desires to buy a 24 hard drive, a 24 hard drive network attached storage server case, and to be able to make use of that means you need 24 SATA plugs for the hard drives to plug into. On a motherboard, you're at most going to get 6, maybe 8 SATA plugs, and fingers crossed that all of those work. because if any of them are broken, then you're gonna be out of luck. And then you can get raid cards, or not actual raid, hardware raid cards, but cards that just give you more SATA plugs that have 8 into that. So that would mean if you're getting 8 on the motherboard and you buy 2 of those cards, then you take up 2 PCI Express slots to have 24 there. Which, that's doable unless you get a motherboard that has only 2 PCI Express slots and doesn't have some kind of internal graphics. The one thing no motherboard I get will probably be able to ever support, and I'll probably never be able to afford, would be the ECC error correction buffered RAM, which it would be nice to have that, but yeah, that would just drastically increase the expense of the RAM. And certainly the speed of the RAM and the overclocking capability of the RAM is another issue. If you get a Ryzen 1 CPU and put it in a modern motherboard, it won't be able to support higher overclocking speeds. Whereas if you get a Ryzen 2 or Zen 2 processor, you will be able to support overclock speeds. Although, again, I probably need to double check that, because I might very much be buying myself, future-proofing myself stupidly. Like, in all fairness, the RAM I'm running right now,
Time for me to prove myself.
it probably is somewhere around, at most, 3000 megahertz RAM. So even if I just bought a non-overclocked DDR4 3200 megahertz RAM, I would probably be getting a small improvement in speed, but I would like to get some overclock speed. I'd like to have much faster RAM if possible, but I am gonna have to double check to see if Zen 2 processors, which are the ones that are available now, can actually handle the overclocking specs of some of the RAM that I've seen that's been available for sale. And it may be the reason why the RAM is for sale is because it is selling itself as something that actually no CPU at the moment can actually accomplish or do. And future-proofing yourself is kind of a mistake for me, because I'm never gonna buy a new like, I'm never gonna buy a new CPU and replace the old CPU. I hate the idea of pulling a CPU out and replacing it. 70 gold for that level of chest and a free victory. So yeah, I definitely am having to relearn all the tricks and all the little secrets. There probably were a lot of little secrets and tricks that I didn't even know when I built my last computer, because I do tend to build a computer and then fall out of the intrinsic low-level detailed followings of computer designs. But it also kind of feels like the newest computers' specs are somewhat more confused than they probably should be. Where I imagine a lot of things would just work if you plug them in, but if you want them to work properly, you probably have to spend some extra effort to make sure that they are tuned exactly right.
I'll be a great queen one day.
Alright, let's start going over the video game news. We have more than a small amount, which is, I guess, the best way to phrase that. Let's see. Kill that.
No one else has
Hit
to know.
that. Hit that in the turn. TechCorruptor has an article, and we kind of talked about this already. Unity's IPO paints an optimistic future for the game engine. The initial public offering for Unity went very well, and you can't help but wonder if this in part was part of Epic's big move to maybe distract and look like they are more successful and more more in line with being the big powerhouse company. One thing that I just learned is that Fortnite Save the World actually was developed in part by People Can Fly, which was owned by Epic for a while there. And they kind of changed, they lost a lot of their talent from People Can Fly. They changed their name to Epic Europe just to, assumedly to make name confusion. And then eventually People Can Fly as a corporation and as like an office gained their independence again, and I think they're independent at the moment, and that probably was after they gained their independence that they started trying to do their publishing deal with Gearbox to re-release the remastered version of Bulletstorm. But yeah, I also found out that Cliff Bleszinski worked for Epic and made the Gears of War games for Epic, and so that might explain some of the situation with Microsoft supporting Epic in their lawsuit, which that lawsuit did come through, and I listened to like the full declaration by the judge as far as the stay of action, what is it called, restraining order that they put out. And the judge, at least initially, and there's a decent chance where judges will sound like they're siding with one person, and then in their final decision they'll turn out to side with the other person. But the judge initially in his and this may be a different judge than actually is the judge that has to heal the whole case. He said that Epic in their Fortnite issue is an emergency of their own making. Really, he saw through Epic's ploy, and so he said, no, your Fortnite game can be continuously banned, can still be banned from the Apple Store. But then he did split the baby, as it were, to just try and stay the status quo, which is really the point of that kind of order, is just to keep everything the way things are for the most part, until a proper full case can be heard out and had. But he did tell Apple that no, Apple, you cannot ban the Epic Unreal Engine API sources on the grounds of that secondary contract, because that would just be so far reaching and it would potentially affect so many other people and hurt society in general if Apple did do such a massive retaliatory action. And I honestly wouldn't put it past Apple to have known that, and for their lawyers to have known that, and they were just gonna throw that out there as this is our first glancing warning shot to Epic to stop this nonsense and see if maybe Epic would back down. But there kind of is some wiggle room for Apple. They could still ban access to the Unreal Engine in their development software for other reasons. They just can't ban it for the reason as it was written, because of them violating the App Store agreement, a different agreement. And a lot of that, I think, probably comes down to the interpretation of those two very separate contracts, where the development in the app API agreement is separate from the App Store agreement. And we'll almost certainly see a newer agreement written going forward with Apple that says if you violate any of our App Store agreements, then you can also be terminated for the development agreement. Or I wouldn't be surprised if there's just wording that says for no reason whatsoever at any point Apple can just terminate your account, which that's really what they would want to put there, is just saying, hey, if we just decide we don't want to do business with you, we're not going to do business with you. And I still feel like that very much is the final verdict that's going to happen between Apple and Epic, is they will say, no, we cannot force a corporation to go into business with people that they don't want to go into business with. Although the whole FRAND concept of fair and reasonable pricing kind of seems like it is probably a case where where companies are being forced to go in business with other companies. Continuing on, Gamma Sutra has an article. Rocksteady's response to claims of inaction outlines past and future anti-harassment plans. So this is more of accusations, #MeToo. One of the things I would say, though, is particularly the Rockstar allegations have not had the same impact as the Ubisoft allegations. There just kind of hasn't been any meat on that bone, I suppose is a good way to say it. For a lot of these accusations, they do seem like they are increasingly becoming more just the bottom of the barrel complaints, limp-wristed complaints, as they were. And as I personally am developing a scale of how bad all the video game companies are, it is really a race to the bottom for a lot of things. And I guess maybe the Harvey Weinstein situation is somewhat like that also, in the sense that what Harvey Weinstein was accused of and Bill Cosby was accused of were fairly horrible things and clearly illegal things. Harvey Weinstein ended up in jail. So
I'll show you something
you
nice.
definitely compare that to complaints of, oh, somebody was mean or somebody was rude to an actor. Those complaints really feel like they are not worth the effort to actually listen to or heed.
I'm gonna pummel ya.
Let's see. TechRaptor has a review here for a game called Lovingly Evil, which looks to me like it's a visual novel dating game where you're dating monsters. Once again, which there's about 4 or 5 of these. They've given it a 6.5. Lovingly Evil has great character and a genuine funny script, but this dating sim that could have benefited from more dating. This is a dating sim that could have benefited from more dating. Pros are great characters, great sense of humor, brilliant soundtrack. Cons or dialogue choices have little impact. The endings feel underwhelming. And honestly, I don't even know what kind of endings you want in a dating sim. Honestly, like you either have one that's an adult game and thus you're going to end the game somewhere after you've slept with the last girl that you can possibly sleep with. That's like how Honey Pop ended. Or you go more clean with it, and then you have a dating sim where you declare your love, decide to go out and become a couple, decide to get married. I could see particularly in a dating sim you could declare your love and then it could fade out, and then 4 years later you're married, you have a kid, and you can say a simplistic fade to black, they lived happily ever after type story, and nobody's really going to complain about that idea, that concept. But yeah. Or you could perhaps have a tragic ending if you felt the need to do that, and have the one you end up dating dumping you or dying or something like that. Although that's probably not the ending. That would subvert expectations quite a bit if that was the ending to your game, to your dating sim game. Alright, well, I'm gonna hit this and then hit this and call that a day. We have a game on Steam here called Spinodrum, which I think is a drumming simulator game. It looks like there might be something here, but I don't know if you are programming the drummer to see the actions that the drummer is doing. These are fairly bad animations by the looks of it. And at a certain point, you're probably just programming a drum machine, and it's just a drum machine with some animation on top of it. This is tagged as hand-drawn. This is not hand-drawn animation. I can guarantee you that much. So you've got some lies in the user tags, although that might be the user's fault. It's free, so I guess the price is right. English only. Third-party EULA though for a game, free game seems weird. Let's go and do that. And just end the turn. TechRaptor has an article here. Dark Deity developers look to spice up the Fire Emblem formula. So
Striking for optimal damage.
here you have a game that they're secretly advertising here, and so there's this game called Dark Deity that must be in development that I've first heard of. But here you can see a lot of references to Fire Emblem, and that's weird because I'm not seeing anything here that says that the developers of this game actually worked on Fire Emblem, and I'm fairly certain they didn't work on Fire Emblem. So they're really stretching it at this point. And yeah, here's what the game probably is going to look like from the Kickstarter page of Dark Deity. So the artwork that's being showed at the top here for the text part is not artwork you're even going to see very often. At a certain level, there is just a kind of high amount of dishonesty. I don't know how you call it anything else. It is just straight up dishonesty around what your game looks like when you see these RPG games that are intentionally highlighting their visual novel zoomed in graphics, and not really showing that the vast majority of time you're going to be looking at tiny little pixel art characters that look like they're from a NES era.
Bring them thunder. Okay, that's enough from you.
Your dying screams, music to my ears.
Am I going to be able to win?
Strength
Nope.
is formidable.
Yeah, I may have just gotten really lucky because I'm not getting the massive victories that I was getting before, but I played pretty much on Monday Forcecraft very consistently, so I'm just gonna stick with Bloodcraft. I guess that's pretty much what I'm gonna do. Is every week we'll do a pick 6, and I'll figure out what deck I think needs the most new cards and deserves a deck rebuild until we've gotten some decks that are really, really good. And at a certain point here, I need to think about making a rotation deck, but I just don't have enough of the cards in rotation yet to make that choice. Next we have a game on Steam called Nightmare Protocol, which looks very dark. Let's see. Story-rich first-person dark adventure. Tag dark. And I think dark is right in the sense of the visuals being dark. By the looks of it, from this trailer, you're basically a dungeon crawler. It's free. Wonder if we're getting the same free games from different people, or different free games from the same person. That's what I was meant to say. Yeah. I don't see any reason why I would want to play Nightmare Protocol, and oddly, because it's free, it kind of lowers its relevance. We already talked about it, but Gamma Sutra has the article. Epic granted temporary restraining order to protect Unreal Engine on Apple platforms. This is the second article of this in this continuing story that Gamma Sutra has put very opinionated yellow journalism as their title. They clearly are siding with Epic in the sense that they have completely ignored the part that the second part of this sentence, this way too long title, should be, and denied a order to be reinstated on the Apple Store. So while they won on one count, they lost on the other count. And Gamma Sutra is totally ignoring that second part in the title. Let's actually see if they even mention it in the actual article.
I'll be a great queen one day.
So when you get down to the fourth article, it says Rogers, who was probably the judge, however, sided with Apple over the removal of Fortnite. So hidden down to the fourth of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Well, that actually just goes on for a while with a long quote at the end. Hidden in the middle of the article is the second part that is just as weighty as the first part.
Someday I'll... What?
Don't get me wrong, there might be a point in which a judgment does come down and they are forced to allow Fortnite on their storefront and allow Fortnite to specifically allow be able to do internal payment processing without giving Apple a 30% cut. That might happen. But part of the reason why the judgment went its way is because the judge seemed very unimpressed by the argument that Fortnite is a seasonal game and to play the seasons, players have to have an updated version. Thus, anybody who is playing Fortnite exclusively on Apple products now can't play the newest season. He was very unimpressed with, oh, so you've in your own app created this artificial ticking clock to add a sense of urgency. Let's see. ScumVM is now supporting a game called Legend, but they are also looking for, I think, technical writers still. Yeah. So, I could be wrong about that, but I think that's why I had their thing open.
Stay beautiful. Dream for eternity. What?
So, we now no longer get more than 6 play points, and I'll just at my end of my turn I'll draw a card and deal 1 damage to an enemy leader for the rest of the game. Let's see, we have a game here on Steam called The Darkest Island, and it does look like a Dark Island survival game. This is probably an asset flip survival game for $2.99. English full audio. Yeah. Honestly, I think I would just be frustrated with a game like this. So, this is a potential hidden gem I'm willing to miss. It's probably not a hidden gem, but like I kind of don't want to play a game that has nothing but dark screenshots. I've had enough of that. I've had enough of struggling to see things in the dark, and most of the time I'm playing bright, colorful games, so it's not like I've even run into a lot of games in that general concept. Okay. Everybody that comes into play has ward. So I do this. I evolve this. I put this.
So many souls.
And then put that there. then in the turn. TechRaptor has this article. I think we already talked about it, but there's a report that the Nintendo Switch Pro is possibly coming in 2021. The thought here is this is actually going to be a pro level Switch. It's the specs have rumored to not yet be finalized, but they're seeking things such as more computer power and 4K high definition graphic output, assumingly when it's docked. Assuming the Switch, the Pro, looks anything like the Switch at all and is actually a mobile device at all. It would be really weird though if they tried to double back and the Switch Pro was a plug-in console that only worked on TVs.
So many souls. I'll show you something nice.
Let's see.
Time to dance.
That. And then we'll do that.
What?
And then we'll end the turn. It does open up a door to the idea of perhaps me finding a good excuse to not buy a Switch. Like, I was thinking that I might have enough money left over after building a computer to get a Switch and play some of these Nintendo games that I haven't played in quite a while, pretty much since the Wii. But I'm gonna switch over here and go back to Forestcraft. But yeah, I don't know if I would really justify going down the Pro route for a Switch. I think Nintendo, if they're gonna start trying to have a Series X and a Series S type console, they're gonna find that totally does not work for their clientele and the type of games they make. I don't think they're gonna be able to double dip there, and I don't think that I would play enough Nintendo games to justify buying a Switch. And the Switch in particular has that problem of not really allowing for multiple accounts or allowing games to be transferred from one account to another account. So there isn't the best path, as far as I understand it, in which if you had the Switch and you wanted to move to the Switch Lite, you'd be able to do that. And if you got a Switch Pro, I don't know if you'd be able to easily switch from a Switch Pro to from a regular Switch to a Switch Pro. We have a game on Steam here called Ruin Arc. There was an interesting thing on the Giant Bomb cast, which I'm still getting stuck listening to because honestly I just don't have enough things to keep me busy. I've decided I'm gonna turn on the advertisement, like personalized ads on YouTube. My experiment there, as far as seeing what an average random person would see as far as an ad, has played itself out. And there is this one like meditation or Buddhism prayer app ad that is just incredibly offensive. If you've seen it on YouTube, you'll probably recognize it too, because it starts before you can skip the ad. It says there's this woman that comes on and she goes, "Every day I'd come home from school and my dad would be drunk and hit me." And you have to hear that sentence before you can even skip the ad. And I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear it 5-6 times a day in particular, as the ads on YouTube are not that varied. And I don't know if the story is true or not, so on the other hand, that even makes it potentially worse, because this could just be a dramatization for catching people's attention.
Don't push your me, fairies.
In lesser offensive ads that I see all the time are just the same ads for Arknights and and terrible mobile games that are constantly being dishonest about what their game looks like and how it plays. So I think I'd like to turn on personal ads just to get away from the ads. And it would be slightly shocking if that somehow improves the personalized videos that they recommend, which YouTube is still horribly terrible at recommending things. And it's fairly obvious too. Like, I looked up a speedrun on Cuphead and then it started recommending me 5, 6, 7 different Cuphead speedruns, and I'm like, I wanted to watch one. I don't want to watch 100 speedruns of Cuphead. That's too many.
Not one for pranks.
Beg for mercy.
And so I had to go back until it just stopped giving me suggestions based on the Cuphead speedrun. But it also fails to recommend any of these small videos from small time creators. It does not seem to even use their videos as points to say, hey, here's a small video that's around a programming concept. Let's take that general programming concept, which maybe those videos don't have any tags on them, but they should have some data to connect them, or just show me more videos from those creators again from their channel. And they don't even want to do that. They are so pot committed to forcing you to watch the big content creators that you absolutely will not have a good time on YouTube if you don't want to watch what YouTube wants you to watch. And it's very frustrating. It would be like going to a restaurant and being served something wrong, and then going a second time, giving them a second chance and being served the food wrong, and then going a third time, giving them a third chance, which you shouldn't have probably even given them a second chance, and being served the wrong thing. And they always serve you the exact same thing when you order something completely different. So you finally go back into the back room and you go, how come I keep getting served? You go talk to the chef and you're like, how come I keep getting served things wrong? And they go, oh no, that's just our algorithm. That's how we do it here. We always give you the wrong thing, or we always give you what we think you need because we're smarter than you. That's pretty much the experience on YouTube. Is you're just getting served what they want to serve you. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Ruin Arc, which looks like it is a strategy, ugly looking game, top down, like they're calling it a country sim, early access for $17.99, English full audio. That is way too expensive.
Why are you here?
Let's see. 1, 2,
Let's play.
and 3. Here, Tech Raptor has the same story. Judge grants Epic Games restraining order protecting Unreal Engine. So you can see Tech Raptor also is writing it from that perspective. Here they try to explain the idea of the restraining order and do a little bit better job. here in the first paragraph it says the ruling notably does not protect Fortnite or allow it back on the storefront in any way. Which they do make a point on that, although the way they phrase that, they kind of make it feel like they didn't even mention Fortnite, and I think Fortnite definitely was mentioned, and the motion to protect Fortnite was denied. It was actively denied in the judgment. It wasn't just that it did not mention Fortnite, or so. Yeah, TechCropter's not doing the best balanced news reporting either. It's basically a joke post at this point on Reddit that I just saw a few hours ago, where they said, where can I get the most unbiased news that's not well, it was basically saying where can I get the most complete unbiased news, and there's just like no response that's legitimate at all, because there is no news site about the one place that is probably the least biased. They put as a joke it was The Onion, and I think there probably is some truth to that. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Since, a cyberpunk ghost story. And this looks to me like this is probably a Chinese adventure game. Although visually it looks fairly nice in some screenshots. You have a lot of other dark screenshots. You can also see it's mixed reviewed, and it's $17.99. We're seeing a lot of games that are trying to go down that route of being rather expensive. This one is English, Japanese, Russian, and Chinese, so it might be a bad quality Chinese game as much as it might be a bad quality Japanese game, but I would suspect it's Chinese regardless. Yeah, it's overpriced, so that's not making it to the fall list. And that is consistently still an issue that's happening here, is where we're seeing a lot of games come out on Steam, but they're all very, very low quality these days. Let's see. Gamatsu has an article here. A Space for the Unbound has been delayed to Q3 2021 and it will be published by P-Cube. I have not seen any information about this game as far as I can tell. Looks to me like it's probably a Japanese adventure game, maybe with some RPG elements, but it's also, maybe I saw a hint here, a teaser of this game like a month ago, and it immediately has been pushed back. It's being also described as a slice of life adventure game. Which that's an interesting idea. I don't know if you can really make an interesting slice of life adventure game, because the two concepts just by the words alone are contradictory. If you think about it, you can't have a slice of life experience, which would be a relatively banal normal experience, and have an adventure which is a out of the ordinary abnormal experience. Like, even for like a character like Indiana Jones who seemingly goes on adventures all the time, the concept of his movies are that those are adventures even on top of his regular adventures. Those are the ones worth mentioning and talking about.
Help me, fairies. I'm gonna rest for a bit. Stay away.
well. I just boned that up horribly. I should have just ended my turn. And see, and this is just gonna beat me, so I might as well just concede when I see this Rhino approach. Like, clearly this is a new card that was just added, and it's broken. It is broken and unlimited, at least. Okay, well.
Hey, let's play.
Is there any reason to attack?
Hey, let's play.
Not really. Gamatsu has an article here. Super Bomberman R Online launches September 1st, which
Trespassers are more than welcome.
Will be available. Let's see.
You're done for.
I don't know if there's really a legitimate reason to buy Bomberman yet again. Though, I mean, I could try and look at this video and see if there's maybe something here that would up to 64 players at once. They're probably trying to do something like Tetris 99, but they're also trying to charge people, it looks like, at least $9 to play the game, $9.99. And I just don't think that there's
Strange.
a synergy to that idea.
May the forest be at peace.
The ball.
I'm so smart. Yeah. Ow.
So the only thing I think I could do here is try and win before he can play his strategy. I watched The King's Speech, a pretty good movie, but as I'm stuttering here, I'm hoping I didn't just subconsciously teach myself a stutter.
Absurd. Absurd.
I have been known to, on rare occasions, stutter, but not any real level. I guess that also brings about an interesting question about when you have Biden saying that he had a stutter when he was a kid, how bad was it, really? Because it'd be fairly easy for anybody to say I used to stutter when I was a kid, and almost everybody would have done it once or twice in their life. And honestly, I guess you could probably confuse stammering versus stuttering, and I probably stammer more than I stutter, if there is a big difference there.
Prepare for defeat.
See between my lies.
Moving on, we have a game on Steam called Jessica, spelled Jessika, which is not a way I've ever seen Jessica spelled. Which this is a full motion video detective mystery game, which maybe they could do something like Her Story and it would be interesting again. It's $9.99 discounted, English full audio, German full audio. Yeah, I'm willing to put this on the fall list and see how this goes. But it definitely does feel like you're very much doing something like Her Story. Although maybe in this case you're going to have a bit more puzzles and a bit more gameplay. The interface for Her Story was pretty bare bones. Here we have Tech Raptor again being opinionated in their titles. Updated, more victimized employees leave Lab Zero as Mike Z delivers an ultimatum. Since the original publishing of the story this morning, 2 more former employees have announced their retirement from Lab Zero Games. These employees are Mark Kitewright, former artist, and Jonathan King, former senior animator. The public comments released from these two reflect a lot of the same themes and information shared by Brian June, but also expand on the inappropriate behavior of Mike Z. Now, the problem with this story, as it continues, is we're still not getting any meat on the bone as far as what his inappropriate Mike Z's, which is his nickname, the owner of Lab Zero Games, inappropriate activity is, and it at best sounds like he's a jerk or a narcissist, like, which those are about the same thing, but it doesn't. We're not getting any real explanation of anything illegal or really inappropriate, and the counter conspiracy theory here that is brewing up is that Lab Zero Games just hired a bunch of SJWs and they tried to stab him in the back, and that failed miserably. And in all fairness, I'm sure that's what Mike Z feels is true, even if that's not what most people would believe is true. And I would say that Randy Pitchford of Gearbox probably feels somewhat similar in that experience too, where he probably feels like he's getting stabbed in the back a lot of times when people complain about his behavior. Of course, once again, the difference between Mike Z and Randy Pitchford is they can't produce any tweets or any video of Mike Z acting bad at this point. They have not shown any real receipts, whereas Randy Pitchford is kind of constantly getting caught lying or acting inappropriate or just unprofessional. And I would also say that Randy Pitchford, mostly unprofessional, not really even that bad that he would be cancelable. Short of the story of him just being a constant liar, which is bad for business, and him potentially pushing someone, which is a minor offense, like criminal offense that would not have been prosecuted for sure. It's the embezzlement claims that are the worst for Randy Pitchford, and they're still not been successful at actually proving any of those claims. So, continuing here. They revealed an ultimatum delivered to the staff of Lab Zero Games. Now, ultimatum is probably very ill journalism here. I imagine when he put out a email or something that said, hey, this is how it's going to be. If you don't like it, you can leave, which is pretty much all you can say in a situation like this as the boss. And certainly almost every employer has heard that statement said to someone.
Come on in. Take a seat.
Let's go just play that.
Nice and heavy.
I could have evolved that and done more damage. See. Both comments refer to Mike Z's overeagerness to talk about his genitals. I misread that. Alright, so So that's a jerk, and that's not professional talk, but there's been tons of offices where it's fairly common for people to talk about their their genitals, and that could be anything from a genital like response of like somebody could say this game is gonna make you $1 million, and he might just be responding $1 million my dick, or something along that line, and that might be it. Or it could be 5-minute long soliloquies describing every single freckle and wrinkle. Or, you know what it more is just, he might just be one of those jerk people that says, yeah, I've got like a 12-inch dick, and so, like, not professional, certainly, not also anything that's going to get somebody thrown in jail. And if you are looking at it from the counter-conspiracy thought that this is just SJW's really reaching to find a reason to cancel Mike Z, that's a bottom of the barrel complaint. Putting coworkers on the edge of making inappropriate comments on edge by, I guess it's putting coworkers on edge by making inappropriate comments about their bodies or shaming them for what they were wearing that day. Again, sounds like a jerk. But once again, compare that to what Harvey Weinstein was doing, or Bill Cosby was doing. Let's find some nuance here, and some realistic prioritization, I guess, at the least. Because these complaints so far are arguments for Mike Z being asked to take sensitivity training. They are not grounds whatsoever for the board taking complete control over his company and forcing him to sell the company that he's in charge of and owns at a low price, which the counter conspiracy certainly will point towards the idea of following the money.
Your strength is formidable.
Here's an interesting quote. Mike is not the person we thought he was, end quote. Which, when you think about that, how can that possibly be the case if Mike Z is such a just horrific jerk all the time, and he's just constantly talking about his genitals, and he's constantly making comments on the way people look? He does kind of seem like he might be a grandiose narcissist, as many CEOs tend to be, where he's subconsciously trying to manipulate and attack people just for his own personal enjoyment of sadism.
Is fighting and despair all you know?
But yeah, there's let's see. There's still no real claim here that justifies what amounts to an attempted theft of Lab Zero games. And they have already... It's important to mention that Lab Zero Games has lost business contracts. So this feels a lot like the Vic Mignogna situation, which that court case is still going on. It's waiting for an appeal after the anti-slap motion went against Vic Mignogna. So it's actually nowhere close to even starting the real court case. but through these accusations, I believe the Skullgirls creator have stopped doing any business with Lab Zero Games, and I believe a different company may have stopped doing business with Lab Zero Games. So potentially these accusations have ruined the company, and that's not just going to hurt Mike Z, that's going to hurt everybody, every employee left. So here's how Cartwright claims this ultimatum. Kim's tweet revealed that after taking 100% control of Lab Zero Games, Zaymont, which is Mike Z, issued his employees an ultimatum, and this is clearly yell journalism, probably directly from Kim, that they can continue to put up with his toxicity at Lab Zero Games or leave by August 31st. With this deadline a week away, it's likely that we will see more employees sharing their own stories about Zaymont and announcing their departures. And I guess we'll see. But honestly, while this may be an ultimatum, this is the right move for Mike Z, too. Like, if the board is trying to steal your company out from you and rip you off in the same process, if there is a bunch of SJWs in your company and they have decided that you're the next victim of cancel culture that they're going to attack, this is the right response. And it's not a pretty response. It's not going to be a clean response, but clearly Mike Z has to clean house here. And he has to say, hey, if either you like that I'm in charge and you're going to respect me and you're going to listen to my instructions and you're going to work with me, or you're not. Because he can't have employees here that are going to just snicker behind his back and not do what they're told to and just hate him and then just try to post on Twitter how awful your boss is. Although, yeah, you shouldn't probably follow your employees on Twitter and such, but when it's become just downright personal attacks, which it does kind of feel like, whether justified or not, these are just a cancel culture mob at this point, personally attacking Mike Z. And I'm going to get off the story at this point because I don't think there's... it'll be interesting to see if there's like a court case that says he can't take 100% control and fire the board. I think he can, and I think we won't see any successful court cases challenging that. But
May the forest be at peace.
This may very well be the first instance of seeing the companies figuring out how to deal with SJWs and eliminating them from companies. Certainly, if I was going to start a new company, I would do everything in my power to make sure I don't hire SJWs. And with the removal of SJWs from their positions of a power that they've often been handed or earned unjustly, didn't really earn, we may see the end of SJWs having any real effect, particularly as more and more people, I think, are going to start realizing that being allowed on Twitter does not justify, it does not make someone right, it does not make that someone sane, and it does not make someone newsworthy, which at the moment, particularly in the video game industry, far too many companies, whether it's Gamasutra or TechRaptor, do feel like it's newsworthy to reprint what, for all they know, are baseless accusations without doing any actual investigative journalism or checking sources or anything like that. Like, video game journalism is going far too easily down the path of being tabloid journalism instead of being proper news. There is also a constant argument that is often made saying that SJWs just are not capable of making anything, and that's why they have to try and infect and join some other group, some other organization, and then tear it down from the inside and try and steal it. And I think there's an argument to be around that. I have yet to see too many hyper successful creators that are also spending all of their time on Twitter and being SJWE. It's the video game critics that don't really do anything and don't make anything. That was the other thing I wanted to talk about Giant Bomb, is that they had one of the people from the Giant Beast group there, and they were asking him about how he was, what he was playing, and he was talking about how he was playing Animal Crossing, and I don't know if he was jokingly talking trash about his girlfriend, but he was saying he was just playing Animal Crossing very easily and not trying to force anything and just taking it easy. And then his girlfriend, in the middle of the podcast, walks in the door and she goes, "I can hear you talking poop about me," although she used the S word, and she kind of yells at him for like 5 minutes, and everybody else on the podcast is like just kind of laughing, and I'm like, what is going on here? Are they really having like a fight here, or is this comedy, or what? I think they were really having a fight, and I'm like, why did this not get cut out of the podcast? That seems weird, because it wasn't even like a live broadcast. And why did like that seems weird. And I certainly would hate to see the Giant Bomb start going down a route of a kayfabe type experience where there's just people having fights and getting in arguments. There was a podcast on YouTube that still goes that was all built around like internet drama stuff, and they would do a whole bunch of kayfabe wrestling stuff, and it was interesting for a while, but eventually it just got very tired and formulaic, and it was just very obvious that was not, it was scripted. But it's even worse if it wasn't scripted. But yeah, that's definitely weird to be listening to a video game podcast and end up hearing a fight between a girlfriend, boyfriend, or spouses. I don't know if they're actually married. But I also wouldn't be surprised if people are just more and more going crazy in lockdown and isolation. To get back to the Lab Z story, TechRaptor also has this: Skullgirls publisher kicks Lab Zero Games off the project. So they've been removed from the indie fighting game Skullgirls as its developer on PC and console versions, which which means that Skullgirls, or whichever Skullgirls version this is, probably is going to have a continued delay, but I feel like Skullgirls, some version, the initial version of Skullgirls came out a long time ago, so I don't know if they're just adding more characters or they're porting it to new consoles and new mobile phones. But that is definitely business related damage that has happened on accusations that someone is a jerk, and very weak accusations that someone is a jerk. And it's kind of a ridiculous thing to say, but I kind of do feel like if someone toes the line fairly well and they're just a jerk boss, we're not at a point in society where it would be fair and just and appropriate to cancel people because they're a jerk. Because if we start going down that route, we're literally gonna end up canceling everybody. Almost every boss is a jerk. Almost every boss is rude. And none of their accusations seem like they're anywhere close to illegal activity or anything other than slightly unprofessional activity. And for the video game industry, the entire video game industry has always been unprofessional. So we may see some new professionalism start to be shown around the video game industry. But I could definitely also see Mike Z succeeding. And I do feel like also if Mike Z shut down his company right now, sold it completely, took that money, started a new company, hired new employees, he would probably be able to bring his new company to success. Where I would say it more than likely the people that have just left the job and made the accusations, they are probably just moving on to another company, and they probably won't do too much to be successes for themselves or make the new companies they work for be successes. I would be very, very wary of hiring someone who's made these accusations about someone else, even if the accusations are true, because I would be very much afraid that they would, after a couple of years, decide to make the exact same accusations again at the new company.
Help me, fairies.
I envy you.
Some people are just complainers too, and they find things to complain about. And sometimes I think I've been the complainer and found things to complain about. Even although sometimes I think the complaints were also very, very much justified. Moving on though, we spent way too much time on that article. Crosscode PS4 and Switch physical editions have been delayed to September 15th in Europe and October 20th in North America. Which, okay. More delays. Which at a certain point, these delays may not even justify news. But they are news. That's the weird thing, is that they're more news than a lot of things. So the trick I think I've learned with this deck is to have this card from the beginning that way and just hold on to it and be ready to play it, because there's a lot of scenarios that happen where you need to destroy an amulet or character. Umahari Kawase Bazooka for PS4 and Switch has been delayed to October 30th in North America. This is the Umahari Kawase monster Smash Brothers clone, which I don't think any big AAA developers have decided to make any more Smash Brothers clones in a while, which is probably a good idea.
Don't hurt me. Hey, let's play.
Next we have a game on Steam called Castle Wonders, A Castle Tale. I think it probably, this is a hidden object game from HH Games, so it's probably cheaper. I think it also is probably a good move for me to just say, what you're going to get from me going forward on any of these cancel culture stories is for the first few days I'm going to defend the one being accused, and I guess maybe that is just my natural instinct is to defend the kicked puppy, whether or not that's turns out to be the right choice or not. I think it in the absence of actual evidence, that's my instinct. And then what's often going to happen, and that this is where it's going to be situational, you're going to find that I may shift away from that position as I get more evidence, or I see more accusations and it becomes more likely. That's certainly what happened with the Ubisoft story, is that the initial complaints were nebulous and sounded ridiculous, and it wasn't until more and more evidence came out. Certainly there was a YouTuber, the Daddy05 controversy, where at first people were complaining about Daddy05 using their kids to run a YouTube channel, and the accusations seemed fairly generic and banal. And then as more and more evidence came out, it was just straight up horrific descriptions of child abuse that was happening to the kids, forcing them to act for the YouTube channel. So I could definitely see people going, yeah, Daddy05 is not doing anything wrong, and then people getting more evidence and realizing, oh no, they were definitely doing something wrong. And even at this point, I can imagine that there is a decent number of people that don't know the full story there, and thus would potentially still defend them due to ignorance. So I need to figure out a short phrase, and I think the kicked puppy analogy is probably the best way to do this. Defend the puppy being kicked. As far as this game, Castle Wonders, yeah, it's just an object game for $2.69, English only. I'm not thinking about doing any more hidden object games though, pretty much ever. So unless he has a strategy here, which maybe he does, I might be able to win here. Might. Okay. What do we want to do? Kill this.
The void, it beckons me.
This.
Hey, let's play.
And evolve this, I guess. Do I want to save this? Do this. Do that.
I'll live again.
Get that.
I'm coming for you.
I am majorly regretting eating hot salsa before streaming at this point. Moving on, we have a game on Steam called Reflect Horizons, which
make us
by the
fun.
looks of it, this seems to just be
So much more
a low effort, not even game, like demo. It's some kind of like VR experimental asset flip thing. But yeah, seems to just be based around shadows and lighting. It requires VR. It's free to play, so maybe there's some kind of like tech demo there that's interesting. Although the real question would be, how do you control the lighting? How do you control the sun? Is this a game where you just control the sun and that's it? There we go. So if he can only play one character and it has less than 10 health, well, nope. That did not work. That did 3 damage to him. Not, he can just attack and still win. Next we have a game on Steam here called Undead Souls, which looks like it's a top-down twin-stick shooter, which seems like it's trying to have its own little Binding of Isaac visual aesthetic. Maybe there's something to this. It's $8.99 discounted, English only. They're comparing it to the Binding of Isaac games. I think there probably is a point to mention that Binding of Isaac is such a good game that they managed to not even to sell the game twice in Binding of Isaac and Binding of Isaac Rebirth, and sell several pieces of DLC around the around it too. Let's see if I can actually see how many pieces of DLC are actually available. There is Binding of Isaac and then Wrath of the Lamb DLC for the first game. And then there's the Legend of Bumbo spin-off game, which is the most recent one.
I guess you're looking for a fight.
But then Rebirth, which, let's see. There's Afterbirth DLC for $10.99, Afterbirth Plus, which is apparently free or not applicable until you buy the DLC, which I guess I don't have the DLC of Afterbirth. It's just like, yeah, 3 bits of DLC, 1 spin-off game. There's a lot of fandom around that. And honestly, I think The Binding of Isaac is probably the only just hyper popular niche game out there that could ever justify reselling itself so much. Although you are starting to see things like the Stanley Parable getting a remastered version, and more just generally popular games have been able to pull that off for quite a while.
I'll show you something nice. Unbelievable!
This is a card that I probably should replace with something else. But it definitely is going to be harder to tweak decks as I have more and more cards, as much as building a new deck. Next we have a game on Steam here called Anderson, which looks like it's a horror game. Definitely some dark screenshot syndrome, and it seems to be a little low quality visuals too. It's early access, it requires VR. It's 10.04, which is too cheap. It has one achievement, which makes it seem like it might be an achievement game. And even the logo questionably might mean that it is a meme game or a joke game. Let's see. Let's go and play this.
Let me
And
take
then attack here.
No!
See, this Bloodcraft deck that I'm playing definitely still has some cards that are from the original concept of just having bats, which wasn't a concept that was going to win. Next, we have a game on Steam here called Survive Together, and clearly it's an MS Paint looking game. So we'll say it's $4.99, we'll say it's English, we'll say it's early access, and we'll be done with it immediately at that point. Maybe we will run into a scenario here where there's just a bunch of duplicated tabs, so we can get through this a little bit faster, because this does feel like we're going fairly long today. If your leader's defense is less than your opponent's, well, that is not the case. So we'll do that, and we'll do
I'll
that,
show you something nice.
and we'll attack.
Unbelievable!
Gametto has an article here. PO4A Episodio 1926 has been delayed to November 12th. This is, they're citing various circumstances for the delay, but here you have what is probably an otome visual novel, yep, being delayed, and this might make it to the West, but there's a decent chance it won't also. But we definitely are still seeing a delay. I think the biggest thing that will be interesting to find out is literally going to be where do we go with... Man, I'm just throwing out words there. I don't even have a... I don't have a complete sentence to say. What I was trying to say there, if I can start over, is if we start to see major delays in Western games and no major delays in Eastern games, that will be a black market, certainly for the United States and their COVID recovery compared to the rest of the world. Because we had, particularly in Japan, a delayed reaction, like a delayed infection to Japan. It seemed like it was several weeks before Japan admitted that they had a COVID problem, and we're starting to see, because of that delayed time frame, more and more Japanese games being delayed. So theoretically what we would see is
It won't be long now.
an end to most delays and games actually starting to come out in the West, and then 3 or 4 weeks after that point we should see the same thing happen in Japan. If we don't see the same thing happen in Japan, or if we start to see games are coming out in Japan while they're still being delayed in the United States, then that's going to be a bad indicator. But almost certainly that is what's going to happen.
Have one last farewell.
Too, because the United States has not done a great job as far as dealing with the pandemic. Moving on, Open Critic Yakuza's Like a Dragon release date has been confirmed, which it's kind of ridiculous for them to release a release date, but they've decided to do that. Do we actually have it? It'll release on PC, PS4, and Xbox One on November 13th. So that's, I assume, probably going to be its actual release date. It'd be fairly silly to announce that date and then immediately have to delay it. Remedy Entertainment is looking for a programmer in Espoo, Finland. They're looking for a character technology team programmer, which I assume that is the AI of the characters. That would be what I would guess. Windows 95 is at its 25th anniversary, and Major Nelson retweeted someone here that has a blog talking about Windows 95. I think it's worth mentioning that Windows 95 was definitely a new direction for Windows, certainly. Whereas Windows 3.1 was a situation where it was just introducing a visual interface, and it made a little bit of a more efficient experience compared to DOS, and a much more understandable experience compared to DOS for new people. You really didn't have a product that people could have lived with for the rest of their lives in Windows 3.1. It needed improvement, and Windows 95 came out to do that. Whereas, in comparison, I would say the difference between Windows 95 and Windows 98, and even Windows 2000 and almost all Windows going forward, was, for the most part, just visual improvements. Not improvements of any major note from release to release as far as the underlying technology. There is a lack of support for like DirectX in older versions of Windows, so you would have had to move forward if you were a gamer, and there's probably a lack of support for certain underlying technologies, but most programs really weren't using those technologies anyways. The move from 32-bit to 64-bit operating systems, which was a slow, muddled mess that didn't really get forced upon everyone until, like, I think Windows, I want to say Windows 7. You very well may have still been able to even get a 32-bit version of Windows 7. That was definitely a slow process. And yeah, certainly there are other things, like the moving from the FAT32 or FAT16 file systems for hard drive support to NTFS. Those were big changes. I don't believe Windows 3.1 actually could multitask and have multiple windows open at the same time. Well, I think you could have, they could make it look like multiple windows were open at the same time, but I don't think they were all running at the same time, which there's a fairly large difference there. But for gamers in particular, where there was very few games out there that said you needed Windows 98 compared to Windows 95. In fact, there was very few games out there that even said you needed Windows 3.1 or Windows 95. For a very long time, almost all games were going the route of just being DOS games. Wasn't until Windows became a dominant force. And even now, when you strip Windows of all of its attached services and features, there's very little that can be said around its concepts. And there definitely could be more internal things that were just in Windows, if it were more similar to like the Linux is, in the sense that I think it would make a lot of sense if there was just every single Windows install had an SQL language database in it, instead of the registry, which was a nightmare and became a mess and was a dumb idea in the first place. And you could definitely have like disk-based encryption and security things, and it took them forever to put a firewall by default in an antivirus by default in Windows. I wouldn't be upset if there was a language library for programming built into the operating systems, and to a certain extent I think there is something like that in Windows, but it's not helpful or usable. Windows is just not designed like Linux to have libraries that can be used by multiple people, so you often end up installing similar or the same thing over and over again. I think maybe the most modern Windows versions finally adjusted that. Interesting. This guy's gonna get 10 health as soon as somebody evolves.
Enjoy your short life.
Moving over, because I'm moving on since I'm going on a rant here. We have a game here called Unbeliever, which by the name you'd think you'd be playing as some kind of anti-theist or atheist to some religious organization, but it really just looks like it is an ugly platformer game. The price is free and it's English only. Let's see, is there anything here worth mentioning? No. You kind of run into the problem though of if you were to have a character that was an outspoken atheist or disbeliever to whatever religion exists in that universe, they are either going to be basically defeated or burned at the stake very early, more than likely, or they're just going to be hard to relate to and not worth playing. The idea of being an anti-theist or an atheist in a video game is actually a pretty boring idea, because most video games are worlds where there are gods that step in and cause actions. Even if you are playing as a character who's eventually going to slay a god, like the God of War series, disbelieving in them doesn't really lead towards interesting storytelling.
Better than in the cradle.
You'd have to tell something closer to like a Dragon's Dogma Mass Effect story, where there's where you'd have to set a lot of background and set the environment, set the religious fervor that exists in that world, and then have somebody come out and prove something different or show something different. And even then, proving a negative is almost never an interesting experience. Like, it's a much more interesting idea to play as a character who's an anti-theist or atheist, and then have the god that they don't believe in appear in front of them, either as an antagonist or protagonist, because that makes better storytelling. And in general, gods do make better storytelling. Magic does make better storytelling.
I fall. Hey, let's play. Yeah. Yeah.
This deck needs a card, and I don't know if there is a card that exists like this, but it desperately would benefit from a card that said deal X amount of damage to the leader. X is the number of fairies you've played this game. Moving on, TechRaptor has an article. Ooblets roadmap reveals future content and 1.0 release date. Ooblets is, I believe, another one of the MMO Pokemon clones. In mid to late 2021 is their release date. And I'll let you read the rest of the article and seek it out if you're interested. There we go. Hit. Hit. Play. And play. And in the turn. Next turn, if I can play this, I win. TechRaptor has an article. The future of Bloodlines 2 director's commentary is uncertain. That is, of course, because the directors, I believe, were fired without being given a reason. At least that's what they're claiming. Man. It's not super surprising that I'm not getting a ton of victories at rank C2. That is higher than I probably even should be. But it does certainly still kind of suck that in all card games you end up taking a lot of losses. But I would argue again that was there ever any talk at all of there being a director's commentary for Bloodlines 2? Because I haven't heard any talk of that. But yeah, no duh. Like, this feels like TechRaptor is intentionally writing an article just to bring up something that wasn't even ever suggested that it was going to happen as clickbait. It kind of feels like TechRaptor is desperate to get views, and I imagine that is the case for all video game sites at the moment. That's kind of why I like Gamatsu here, is that they're very no nonsense, and honestly, if I could just get away with looking at Gamatsu, and I wasn't getting a little bit of news with Gamasutra and TechRaptor, I would literally just be following Gamatsu. Because TechRaptor is getting too yellow journalism, and they were the website that I went to because I thought they were better than PC Gamer and IGN and the other likes of mainstream video game journalism. But it seems like they're going the same route. Anyways, Gamatsu has an article here. Paradise Killer launches September 4th for Switch and PC. This is an open world murder mystery game, which I don't think I've heard anything about, but I may have seen a teaser for it. It looks somewhat visually familiar. Let's see. It is a 3D open world, but then it has flat 2D visual novel characters you talk to. So the visuals do seem like they're kind of all over the place. I'm very interested in seeing how this game actually would play. Because yeah, I'm seeing 3D things, I'm seeing flat 2D things, I'm seeing flat 2D characters in 3D environments. Yeah. Well, I am definitely intrigued with this game, Paradise Killer. I think what I want to do at this point, though, is I'm going to skip any more games, and we're just going to cover the news and then wrap up, because I feel like I've been going a little while. And I am ready to wrap up here.
This is my home. You are my food.
Gamatsu has an article here. The next Trails game to feature a battle system with action elements is largely different, with a largely different cast of characters. So, Trails of Cold Steel and the other Trails games. So it does seem like they're going in a different direction. There is an argument that the Switch Pro is potentially going to happen, in the sense that we haven't really gotten any major announcements or releases of any major first-party Nintendo games for the next year or so, or for the next 6 months at least. And the Metroid Prime game is still in development, but we don't have any other news other than it's still in development. So it might be a case that the Switch Pro is actually needed just to get games to run better and actually work. I could see that, but a Switch Pro modification, you just want more RAM, faster RAM, better battery life. If it had an M2 slot in it, so you could put a bigger storage device instead of a SSD card, maybe there would be something to that idea. That would probably be faster speed. There is also the idea you could have 2, 3, 4 micro SD slots instead of one, or even 2 game slots. Maybe they get rid of the cartridges and go with just a second micro SD use, and they just sell games on encrypted micro SDs. I don't think they'd want to do that, but that would be a thought. They fixed the Joy-Con drift, I would imagine, but I don't think you can really change the controller much. You could add better Bluetooth connections, or you could add headphone connections. But yeah, I don't know what else you really do to something like that. You're not gonna do anything crazy. You're not gonna make the screen twice as big. The screen could be bigger, certainly, and faster and brighter and better looking. You could add Wi-Fi. That would be the biggest joke, is if it just added faster Wi-Fi, and to the point where most people didn't even benefit from it. If you added 802.11ax, for instance, to a Switch, most people wouldn't have a router that could connect to it at that speed. Moving on, we have Famitsu's review scores, issue 1656, being updated. So they gave Ageless for the Switch 28 of 40, Aglios for the PS4 and Switch 30 out of 40, Captain Tsubasa's Rise of New Champions, that's a soccer game, 32 out of 40. So yeah, the anime soccer game getting a decent score. Kawaii Deathru Desu was given a 25 out of 40. So I don't know what Desu means, but cute kawaii is cute, and Deathu is probably death. So cute death, like as in a character. And Desu. Like, I feel like if you say Desuka, then you're asking a question.
Dancing in circles and circles.
So, it might be a guess there I could make, but I'd probably wrong.
You will soon learn.
Beauty must be no interruption.
Juicy.
Massacre.
Let's see. The Mummy Demastered came out apparently very late. Like, that game came out a year ago, but it came out in Japan for PS4 and Switch, and they give it a 29 out of 40, which is interesting, but I wouldn't say super surprising considering how it was a spin-off of the Mummy movie that they probably never saw in Japan, and there's no real reason why anybody would like it now. I would love to own Mummy Demastered and play it, certainly, and I think it has relevancy, but I think to Japanese it doesn't have relevancy.
This is grave.
That was a slow game. And then we have Zero Strain here, getting 26 out of 40. There's a decent amount of very badly reviewed games in this list. And that time I got a card pack, which is the equivalent of 100 gold. Although, in all fairness, I think getting some of the cards that I've gotten out of these reward chests are even better than opening a pack anyways. Major Nelson tweeted out another bundle that is available, the East Asia Soft Indie Shmup Shoot 'em Up bundle. And here you have a couple monsters and
Don't underestimate me.
very anime 90s, maybe even 80s or 70s anime looking game. And I don't recognize any of these games, so I'm really interested in finding out where these bundles are coming from and where these games are coming from, if it is becoming a case where the Xbox store is becoming a very large dumping ground for things that aren't even available on Steam. He also retweeted Cobra Kai, the Karate Kid saga continues, is now available for pre-order. So here you have a $31.99 game based on the Netflix continuation of the Karate Kid. Gemetsu has an article here that Atelier Ryza, Ever Darkness, and the Secret Hideout shipments and digital sales have topped 500,000, which that's a good number, but it was kind of a slow experience to get to that number. Let's see, it came out in January. No. The sequel is going to come out in January of 2021. It came out in October of 2019, so it's been about a year. But for a Japanese game, when you have that inherent bias that where some people just will not play Japanese games or JRPG games anyways, it is doing very well. And they had already greenlit a sequel. Which also brings out an interesting thought about how often do games really get greenlit based on their sales outside of the initial 6-week launch window or the initial 6-month launch window. Take your pick.
What a shame.
Like, I imagine games get sequels greenlit probably before the games are even available for sale, and then they get canceled secretly before they actually make any announcements.
How about we have some fun?
You will soon learn.
Fear not, for no one else has to know.
Let's see. Still just trying to activate vengeance.
Oh, yeah, I'm already amped.
Open Critic has an article here. The Game Awards are still happening, says Jeff Keighley. Which, okay. Like, I don't see any reason why Jeff Keighley would ever admit that the Game Awards aren't happening. It's gonna happen in some digital form, I imagine, but it's still gonna happen. Open Critic has the Dragon's Dogma anime is here with a debut trailer. I think you probably can watch the entire thing on Netflix, and I should at some point probably sit down and watch it. Although, I'm not sure I've ever even played a Dragon's Dogma game, so I'm not sure if I'll fully get all the intricacies there. Or, I imagine you'll still be able to follow the story fairly well, even if you haven't played the game. But,
I'll protect my creation.
Witness the power.
gotta evolve here.
Beauty must be preserved. No interruption.
Open Critic has another article. The next Borderlands 3 expansion releases next month. So yeah, we're still getting expansions to Borderlands. Although, yeah, I'm not gonna touch Borderlands 3 until I do the pre-sequel. And I need to do scheduling and really think hard, and I really need to get certain that my macro script programming that theoretically can automatically upload videos. I would need to make sure that is working before I decide to play Borderlands the pre-sequel, so I can just have those videos upload perfectly. I also need to get into a better habit of just having videos upload when I'm not streaming a lot more than they actually are. Very often I don't get around to uploading. Let's see.
Let us conclude.
Tasty little morsel. So many souls.
Okay. Now what do I do?
Let me take the lead.
I failed.
Gametsu has an article here. Inuwashi is now available for PS4 in Japan. A Orange developed mystery visual novel. I've never heard of this before. But yeah, it looks like it's a game. It was released on Steam on March 3rd, so this is just the port of it to the PlayStation 4. So we could see that it was released in March 3rd, and it's not even on the fall list. And why is it not on the fall list? That's an interesting thought, because the English language is not supported. Well, that does look like a game that, if they decided to localize it, I might come back and look at it, but can't really do anything until then.
I'm gonna eat till I burst. 今はダメでも
Well, this one is drained, so I could actually win here. Apparently, Gamescom 2020 is happening. According to Gamatsu, we have a whole schedule here starting August 27th, 28th, 29th, and 30th. Let's see. What are they going to talk about? Opening night with Jeff Keighley, then an unannounced game trailer, Project Cars, Observer, unannounced game trailer, Retro Machina. Let's see. Another unannounced game and several other games. No big AAA games being shown, although any of those unannounced games could have been that. Although Gamescom, being the German equivalent to E3, I believe is what it is. We probably won't get any major announcements. Yeah, I'm not seeing too much.
Your strength is for
We'll get a trailer here for that Indian game Raji, the Ancient Epic. Iconfell, I don't recognize that. Gameplay for the Medium. A game called Sherlock Holmes Chapter 1. Let's see. Hello Neighbor 2 gameplay reveal. I watched a speedrun of Hello Neighbor 1 and it still didn't explain any of the story. I don't know how many people actually do know the story of Hello Neighbor 1 or if it really matters. There's too many like YouTubers playing it in its beta form that I don't think anybody was really playing it when it finally was in a finalized form. You have Minecraft Dungeons, new gameplay. Nobody's going to be interested in that. A lot of named games here, so I imagine you're not going to get anything too interesting. The new Wonder Boy game, Asha and Monsterland, trailer and gameplay. Yeah. Unless they're gonna pepper in all of these presentations with some surprises, it feels like Gamescom is gonna be standard, fairly standard information. We have another bit of drama here from Gamasutra. The Sinking City has been yanked from stores in despite dispute over its publishing rights. I believe The Sinking City was also the game that kind of had some weird fish people that were kind of being the characters were being racist to, but I don't know if there was really an actual real world controversy around that. So French developer Frogwares announced today that it has requested The Sinking City be removed from most game stores over a dispute over the game's publishing deal with Nacon, formerly known as Big Ben Interactive. I do recognize Big Ben Interactive. I didn't think they were a terrible company, but I think what we're having here is a situation where the chickens are coming home to roost. A lot of indie developers decided to become publishers, and they just did not know how to be publishers and do it right and not cause conflicts. Here in this case, Frogwares claims that Nacon took multiple steps to both deny payments to the developers and act as though it were the IP owner for the game. Frogwares states that their original deal was for Nacon to publish the game on Xbox One, PS4, Steam, and Epic Games Store, but after its launch in June of 2019, the company began allegedly reneging on promised payments and claiming that certain stores weren't paying royalties. During that time, copies of the game were allegedly sold without Frogwares' logo on the front or back of the case. and that the studio's name was removed from marketing materials. Nacon, under its former name Big Ben, apparently also published a tabletop RPG with Frogware's involvement that claimed it was the copyright holder of The Sinking City. Now, in all fairness, the opposite argument to this that Nacon, Big Ben Interactive could say is, we do own the rights, we are the publisher, we hired Frogwares as a work-for-hire third-party studio, and they know it, and they're claiming they own something that they don't. And that is something that almost certainly would have to go to a court case to be set out. More and more we're seeing cases where developers are issuing DMCAs and takedown requests of the sort to stores to hurt publishers, whether their publishers deserve it or not. Let's see. On April 20th, a year after the back and forth on these issues, Frogware says it's moved to terminate its contract with Nacon. That opened up a new legal minefield, one caused by the COVID pandemic. After the pandemic began, France passed emergency laws to protect companies during the pandemic, and Big Ben claimed that because of these laws, Frogwares could not terminate its contract, which maybe in France that's true, maybe it's not. Frogwares, for its part, says that a force majeure clause in the contract still allows them to initiate the termination. They also say Nacon has refused to pay 1 million euros worth of royalties. This finally led to Frogwares to request the game to be removed from Steam, Epic, Xbox One, and PS4. The game is still available on platforms where Frogwares has published the game itself. These include Origin, Games Planet, and on Nintendo Switch. And see, this might really be the thing, is that they're just trying to get it taken down on places where they're not getting all the money. This is an unusual reversal for Frogwares, which endured another publishing dispute with Focus Home Interactive in 2019. In that case, Focus Home had allegedly wrongfully delisted Frogwares' Sherlock Holmes games. So, like, you have two incidences around Focus Home Entertainment, and when you have two incidences completely separate with two other entities, at a certain point it starts to feel like Focus Home Entertainment is the one that's doing business wrong. They've reached out to Nacon for more information, and they'll update the article when they respond, which honestly, that means you shouldn't have published the article in the first place, or at least you should have given them 24 hours to respond or something like that. It would definitely feel a lot less one-sided if you said, we reached out for comment and they did not respond after 24 hours. But journalists of all kinds don't bother to do that anymore. Gamma Sutra has an article. They have a job listing here for Windwalker Games, looking for a lead artist. This is in Austin, Texas. I don't know. I've never heard of a game like this. It's a Windwalk Games as a YC, which I think the C stands for capitalist. I don't know what the Y stands for. Oh, Y Combinator, maybe. Backed gaming startup founded by an ex-rioter. So ex-riot games that's dedicated to building the next generation of huge online social games. Okay. And they're making a game called Enemy on Board. Interesting. So, an ex-Riot employee is trying to go his own way, probably through some controversy. Well, they don't like Riot anymore, which I'm fairly certain there was some controversy like that. And we'll have to see if that game ever comes out and if it's good. Gamatsu has an article here. King's Bounty 2 has been delayed to March 2021, published by Deep Silver. King's Bounty. Looks very much like it is probably a real-time strategy game. Yeah, top-down, some kind of board game. But the trailer is being fairly deceptive and very cinematic, and where I imagine the real game is not that cinematic. Man, I have so many games too that came out on Steam. The PlayStation Plus free games for September have been announced. It's PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds and Street Fighter V, which PlayStation Plus at one point was giving out, it felt like 5 games a month, and now they're down to 2, one of which is Battlegrounds, which I thought was a free-to-play game anyways. So, definitely seems like that is an issue. Here we have TechRaptor with the same article. Updated, the Sinking City delists from stores over publisher dispute. Nacon has issued an official statement refuting the claims set out by Frogwares in the story below. Nacon's official statement in full is as follows. Nacon emphatically rejects this open letter, the terms of which do not square with the facts. Frogwares is seeking to discredit Nacon in the eyes of the public and professionals alike, even going as far as to disclose confidential information and jeopardize the distribution of the Sinking City, the development of which was fully funded by Nacon. This behavior, unworthy of any professional, is unacceptable. Nacon intends to take legal action so as to get them convicted and obtain redress. Nacon is confident about the outcome of the dispute, and irrespective of the tricks used by Frogwares to cause them harm. That is a straight out bold statement we've got here that I skimmed the first part of it. So yeah, Nacon, formerly Big Ben Interactive, coming out and saying no, Frogwares is just straight up lying, and they're just straight up trying to discredit us and hurt us. And I think a lot of that definitely comes around the pandemic. People are hurting for money. Scams are going to start being exposed because the money is going to start drying up, and people are going to start investigating. People are going to get desperate and start pulling off more and more attempts, more and more tricks. Honestly, even court cases at the moment, never has it been a better time to have a frivolous lawsuit, because you know the pandemic is going to slow down the process there. You know you can drag people's name through the mud for years. You know you could probably get away with a lot more than you would have been able to get away before the pandemic. So yeah, I would definitely, yeah, same old initial response is I tend to side with the dog that was kicked. It seems to me like Frogwares is intentionally trying to hurt Nacon and delist the game and make people that want to play the Sinking City suffer. Maybe we'll see in court cases eventually later that the exact opposite is true and that Frogwares' claims were true, but a bold, appropriate, that is definitely the kind of response you want to put out. It's just like, no, they're just straight up lying. We're going to sue them. At a certain point too, as an American, I really don't have probably the best perspective to say this, but I'm gonna throw it out. As an American, my perspective is, I don't know if Big Ben Interactive, which is probably a UK based company, can work particularly with Frogwares, which is a French based company. Like, I just don't really think the Eurozone, as it is, the European Union, I don't think their businesses work well enough together, and that their cultures integrate and work well enough together I think French people can be snotty and a pain in the butt, and I think French law is very different, and the French union system is very different, and there definitely have been bigger examples of that where UK, the UK businesses have been able to very cheaply bring in migrant workers from Ukraine on the other side of Europe and have migrant workers do jobs that probably should have been given to UK employees. And that's definitely where part of the Brexit argument comes from, is that they were having jobs lost to them. There was a lot of refugees getting distributed across of Europe in countries that normally would have not accepted refugees. It was just a lack of power there. From, again, a United States perspective, the states of the United States do have a fairly decent amount of power compared to the federal part of the United States. The main big federal government, the president and Congress and Senate and them. Whereas the European Union seems like it's more and more all about being a federal kind of organization that has almost all the power, and the individual countries, the individual states, to use that word with different meaning, had very little power compared to the European Union. And certainly that seems like that has caused problems. Moving on, TechRaptor has an article here. Through the blue portal, why don't we have more Stargate games? Replace the word with here, Stargate report. Let me start over there. Replace the word games here with why don't we have more Stargate movies, and why don't we have more Stargate TV series, and why don't we have more Stargate anything? And it's the exact same sentiment. If you want to know the truth, it's real easy. The person who made the Stargate first movie wanted nothing really to do with the TV series. The people that own the rights wanted to do something with the movie series, so they made it a TV series. There was a rabid fandom that supported the TV series for a very long time, and at a certain point, even that rabid fandom was not enough to make enough money to continue justifying the TV series. There is talk even now of making a remake of the original first movie, which maybe they could then integrate that and span that to another TV series, and maybe there would be a licensed game around that. But when you're talking specifically games, if you mean video games and not board games, since you're going through a wormhole to different worlds every single episode, every single instance, there's going to be just way too much asset flipping you would have to do, way too much animation, way too much different ideas. It would basically be making a remake of like Myst. Instead of using the linking books to get you to a different world, you'd just be using a Stargate. And if Myst was tried to be made now, each of the worlds that you could go to in the Myst series would have to be giant worlds, and there's just way too much. There's just way too much development and MMO concepts there. Even when you think about World of Warcraft, that they didn't add a ton of new lands and a ton of new kinds of plants and animals and characters. This is, I guess, more of a retrospective in which they're saying in 81 there was an arcade game based on Stargate, which interesting because it's not related to the sci-fi movie or series. Then there was a Stargate pinball game in reality. And then there was Stargate for the Game Boy and Game Gear. And then for the Super NES and Sega Genesis. I really wouldn't have thought that Stargate would have had these licensed spin-offs that early, but I guess it did. And then you have an SG-1 mobile device game in 2004, and then you have an SG-1 Alliance game that was canceled in 2005. A lot of Stargate things canceled. Stargate Resistance was released 2010 and then shut down in 2011 as kind of an MMO. See, if you were going to make a Stargate game, you pretty much would have to have people just transport to one world like the original movie, just like an Egyptian world, and stay there for the entirety of the game. And then the next game would have to send you to a different world. And honestly, you would really just have a generic first-person shooter if you made a Stargate game anyways, and so I don't know why you would pay for the license for a generic first-person shooter. Like, anybody could have made a first-person shooter against aliens who pretended like they were Egyptian gods and not gotten sued. Stargate Worlds was cancelled and never given a release date. Stargate Command was released 2012 and shut down in 2013. You could probably see a pattern here where the owners of the license never gave anything more than a year and then canceled it. That is also true, I think, for some of the later TV series. Let's see. SG-1 Unleashed 2013 and 2014. There was like a fan-made teaser, like short movie, like 20-minute movie for some Stargate anniversary that happened, I'd say, about 6 months ago. And again, it just teased the thought of there might be some new Stargate stuff, but it really isn't it. And then, like, the last one, yeah, it was 2014, I guess. I think in general people would probably be more interested in seeing Stargate movies or TV series more than video games. But clearly you can tell that the author here, which is the CEO and founder of TechRaptor, stepped out of behind his desk to fly his flag around Stargate. Which that is also interesting that the CEO and founder of TechRaptor is not the head writer of the website, or he's dipping his toes into the idea of writing, perhaps to replace the head writer of TechRaptor or replace a writer. Gematsu has an article here. Derby Stallion has been announced for Switch. This looks like one of those Japanese racing games that, yeah, this almost certainly won't come to the West. Not terrible looking horses though for a horse racing game. And then Gematsu has an article. Collection of Saga Final Fantasy Legend announced for Switch, which it includes Final Fantasy Legend 1, 2, and 3, which, let's see, I guess were spin-off games. Final Fantasy Legend was originally called Makai Toshu Saga in Japan. Final Fantasy Legend 2 was Saga 2 Hino Densetsu, and Final Fantasy Legend 3 was Saga 3 Jiku no Hasha. But I don't know if these games ever came to the West, and I don't think that these are what would have been the Japanese Final Fantasy 1, 2, or 3. Although maybe it was, because boy did these look old. But these might have been the Game Boy or the Game Gear versions of Final Fantasy. These may have been ports that told a different experience or told a different story. I definitely have to do some research here. Let's see. They're saying here that the first Game Boy RPG to sell over 1 million units was Final Fantasy Legend. And then they're saying some generic fluff about Final Fantasy Legend 2 and 3. So, I could see that getting ported to the West, but that would be very interesting to see if people would want to play a Game Boy game on their Switch in black and white. But I think Game Boy fans tend to be willing to do that, where personally I'm not willing to do that. Endemic Creations is looking for a junior programmer and programmer. This is the developer of Plague Inc. and Rebel Inc. So they're probably looking to work on continuing their 2 games or making a new game. TechRaptor has an article. RoboQuest is a Borderlands-esque roguelike, which that sounds very interesting. Because if I could play something like Borderlands, then that wasn't owned by Randy Pitchford, basically. That is an intriguing concept. When you can see this is rated very positively. It's early access right now. I don't know though if I would really call this a Borderlands style game. It kind of has the visual appeal, but does it have the thousands of guns or thousands of randomly generated RPG elements? Does it have characters that are interesting to talk to and stories that are interesting to hear? Or is this just a game where you're going to run around shooting things? It really comes down to what do you want out of Borderlands. I'm going to put this on the follow list though. It definitely deserves a follow. But it definitely is also questionable as to whether it can tick all the boxes that would make it a fair comparison to Borderlands. I definitely would want some story. It doesn't have to be a wacky, zany story, but I would want some kind of story around a first-person shooter with a Diablo-esque loot box, loot dropping table. Right, and that brings me to my Humble Bundle listings, and there are no new game bundles. And I have probably about 20 games that came out on Steam that I'm going to leave for Friday because we've just been going way too long. And then that brings me back to my Twitter feed. Apparently shift services were offline, and they're now back on. Nutaku's got a new game called Busty.biz. At this point, I'm fully rejecting talking about the Nutaku games anymore. They're all so bad. They're just all so bad that they don't even have relevancy. Let's see. Here we have an article. Facebook claims iOS will harm developers that rely on ad-driven revenue. iOS 14 will do that, which maybe there is something there that would stop ads from playing in iOS 14. Like if the newest version of iOS had an ad blocker in it, yeah, that would serve people with Apple phones using iOS very well, but it would hurt people that are cramming ads or even lightly sprinkling ads onto their websites. But as somebody who very much enjoys having an ad blocker on his network and on his Wi-Fi for all devices, it really is the only way to live. There's you've got to be running an ad blocker. Oh, there was also a story. The Call of Duty Black Ops trailer, or some Call of Duty trailer that came out, showed footage of the Tiananmen Square massacre, and China complained, and Activision immediately chickened out and removed that trailer worldwide. Which I don't know why you're going to even begin to show that if you're not going to stand up and potentially face the wrath of China. Although I also don't know why China is so obsessed about hiding that one atrocity. I guess that was the one atrocity where they massacred their own students who are peacefully protesting, I think. Whereas I bet the Chinese citizens don't really care that they're putting the Uyghurs, the Muslims in concentration camps, or that they've been harassing Tibetans forever, and that they're harassing Shanghai people, or that they're trying to take over, I think, Singapore also. Like, you can just go down that list. Not video game related, but apparently Netflix has canceled Altered Carbon. I watched the first season of that and then got bored trying to watch the second season of it. Netflix, from what I've learned, pretty much just speculates and has people have writing rooms for a new season of everything, and then as they see the numbers, and only the executives at Netflix see the numbers, they then at a very late stage decide whether they're going to have a sequel or not. So people are working right up to the last second, potentially writing a new season, but that may never happen. A mobile studio called Colossi Games has netted $650,000 to fund its debut title, according to Gamma Sutra. We'll talk about that on Friday. Let's see. A cross-gen copy of Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War will cost $69.99, which that's an interesting idea. Make sure that the prices stay the same. Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga release date has been delayed to 2021. That is particularly concerning because it may very well be that TT Games and Warner Brothers, now that they're all owned by AT&T, are shut down before those games are even available. Like, we could be seeing the potential end of TT Games or Traveler's Tales Games. Which one is it, actually? I don't know. Need to double check on that. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the Skywalker Saga Lego game is potentially the last game that ever gets made, or AT&T just sells WB Games and the other game company, TT Games. On the other hand, that might be a good thing, because that might mean that the Lego games actually do run smoothly, which is a consider. Apparently the Epic Store now supports additional currencies and payment methods. I'm looking at some screenshots of Call of Duty Black Ops, and it does look like it is a nicely animated game. They're not gonna cheap out on the visuals, although how long the single player campaign, which I assume it has a single player campaign, is always going to be a question. It's just because if it's like a 5-hour experience and then you're supposed to play a bunch of multiplayer, then it's not really worth it to me. If it's a 20-hour experience, then it would be worth it. And yeah, I'm still scrolling down my Twitter feed. All of a sudden there's a decent amount of news that came out and a decent amount of games that came out. So who knows, maybe we are finally over the slowdown, or maybe it's just getting to a point where they have to announce things. Techcraft has a review for that game Raji, so we'll look at that review on Friday. Yeah, Friday might be a long stream too. I'm trying just to talk about things that are just really important to mention at the moment. Okay. I think I've hit the point where I'm back to where I was 3 hours ago. Yeah. Alright, well, I also wanted to point out before we end the stream that I am continuing to make progress here. So I've gotten all of episode 4 down to episode 0 done. So now I just need to, through the daily quest, get everything done with Gears of Rebellion, through Seeds of Conflict Herring, through Invasion of the World Reaver, up to the point where I was stuck. And in Invasion of the World Reaver, they weren't letting me skip the story. I guess it is probably worth checking at some point here whether I could skip the story now that it is no longer the important thing. Well, I guess the only one that I would be able to skip the story for would be the one... Ah, okay. Okay, I see how this works. So I could skip the battle now, but if I was to do that, then I would just be stuck at Fate's Trigger. So I might as well just finish the battle. Or what I need to do is I need to just wait. And I can finish this battle fine, but I need to wait probably until the next main story happens. And Invasion of the World Reaver is not a two-parter by the looks of it. And in fact, I think 9, 8, 7, 6, and 5 are all the same story, really. So they seem like they probably are going to try and go with more of a just simplistic, individualized episodes. Or at least that seems like that's the case. We could probably look here. Let's see. Orisa reunites with Yuan and the other commons who fought in Iolan. Together they beat back Metallic Vines, a host of droids, and revamped Furies before finally confronting Belphomet. However, Belphomet has become Nova's new vessel and acquired unspeakable power. He absorbs the Verada Magna, but just as all hope seems lost, the Furies regain their former selves and turn against him. Cornered, Belphomet chooses to end his own life. With Natera at peace again, Orisa and company prepare to leap into the next world. So that's pretty much the story we had here. This is interesting art too, very different art style compared to like this art style, which is very in line. This is slightly different art style. So, yeah. In a funny way, it feels like the art style is getting away from the anime art style in this, but for the game itself, seems like it's getting, the cards themselves are still 50-50 as far as half art, half soft pastel. See, like this looks like a soft like oil painting fantasy art style, where this is very much just an anime girl art style. There's always been that inconsistency with this game, and I don't think they're gonna ever really address that. And how I'm back to daily rewards, I don't know, but apparently I need to reload, and then that'll be the end of that of today's stream. I will be very happy to be done with getting daily missions that center around doing main story stuff, but almost certainly that's just gonna set me back up in a position. And so, yeah, at this point, somewhere around 3 o'clock Central Time, it reset everything. So now I need to go and get 3 more victories and do the main story and do another arena run, which probably means I did miss a arena run for whatever it's worth. So I've just got a ton of work I need to do. That's going to be it for this stream, though. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.